May the peace of Christ be with you. I wanted to tell you a story about my experience of beauty. And it goes way back to a time that I used to be running conferences. I ran a conference for Catholic youth ministers, and it was down in Birmingham, Alabama. And the conference had all the things that conferences have. It had exhibitors with exhibit tables. It had keynote sessions and had many breakout rooms. And it had different events that involved food and that kind of stuff. And I had pretty much the main responsibility to make sure everything fell into the right places. One of the nights of the conference, our local host, it was an exciting conference. It had around 1,000 people attend from all around the country, and it was really cool to be with all those different people. One of the nights of the conference, the local host, the diocese, sponsored an event that was only about 3 or 4 blocks away from the hotel that we all were staying in. And it was like a multi-site event. We were 3 or 4 blocks away from the hotel, and we were right in the middle of a place that was very historically connected with the civil rights movement in the 1960s. So we got a chance to experience a couple different venues or settings. The main one was a city block that was now a park, where some riots happened between the police and African Americans trying to seek more rights. And it had all sorts of different monuments to walk through right there. Across the street from that was a church where there was a bombing that took place that killed 4 young African American girls. And so they were giving tours of that church and retelling the story of those 4 young women. And right close by, just across the street and down a half a block, was another church that was doing a church supper. So, and it was a classic Southern church supper with collard greens and cornbread and sweet tea and fried chicken. It was great. And, you know, the local people had come to prepare it and serve it, and it was awesome. And then one of the other stops along the way was also still in the same block area, was the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. So the event was going on throughout the evening, and I was a little bit late coming to the event, but I got a chance to go around to all the different sites and to thank the local volunteers and to thank the people who were helping to, you know, make a difference and organize it for our conference goers. The last place I got to get to was the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. It was pretty cool. I like jazz, so you got to know that. I do like jazz. But on top of that, we get into the Jazz Hall of Fame, and it's this old theater, very small theater, but it's this old theater that's been moved into a museum. And in the museum is all this, you know, typical Hall of Fame stuff for people who had done jazz coming out of Alabama. And our tour guide of our small little group that was going through, our tour guide was one of the original inductees in the Hall of Fame. When the Hall of Fame opened, he was part of the first class of 7 that was installed into the Alabama Jazz Hall of Fame. And he was cool. He was going around and he's referring to, you know, the Count or Duke or that kind of stuff. Everybody was by nickname or that kind of stuff. That was, you know, jazz. He knew all the jazz greats back in the day, and he was referring to them and telling stories about them. And he was just an absolute delight. Our tour, and this is true for everybody else who came for the conference and went through the tour, our tour ended up in the theater section. And it was just, like I said, it was just a small little theater, but it had a nice stage. And on the stage was a quintet for jazz musicians, and they would do a little mini concert, 2, maybe 3 songs, and that was great. Well, we got there, and our quartet actually became a quintet because our tour guide, jazz musician, joined the other 4, and they were playing. They did the 2-3 songs that everybody else got, but then they kept going, and that was cool. And they did another song, and then they kind of finished up the evening with "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," which is a 3-4 minute song. But in jazz fashion, they stretched out to like 12 minutes. And each musician took a turn, kind of taking the lead on their version or their variation, their their feel for "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." And it was beautiful. It was awesome. It was their music just took our small little crowd of the last people night, and it just took us away to a better place. It was so, so beautiful. It was transcendent. And over 20 years later, I still got the feels from that moment. What I learned from that moment of beauty is this truth, is that you and I each have an ability to go higher, go deeper, go better than what's just laid out before us. These guys took a simple song with simple notes and went way beyond what was that song and made it memorable. The truth is that we can transcend our situations. And what I learned about God from that truth, from that moment of beauty, is that our God is such a loving and generous God that the abilities to reach into the spiritual, which I think is what happened, the ability to reach into spiritual are not just God's alone. God has given us this innate ability, this soul type experience to be able to go deeper, to go better.